Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Go-To Food Podcast, brought to you by Swaledale, whole carcass artisan butchers who supply the finest meat from the Yorkshire Dales to some of Britain's top restaurants and to you too. Swaledale produces meat that's interesting to cook, flavoursome to eat, and shows why native breeds deserve our support and promotion. So click the link in the description below to go straight to their online shop where you can try some of their extraordinary treats for yourself, including the creations that Ben has made for our wonderful guest later today,
Amen.
who's best known as the king of the pies, the Michelangelo of pastry. I could go on, but that's, I think, quite enough. But I think it was christened simply Calum. The award-winning author, chef, who's currently, like Orwell and Dickens before him, causing quite a stir in both London and Paris. Calum, welcome. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me on.
Mate, thank you so much for coming. For years, they've ridiculed our food out there, screamed at us roast beef.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been getting any of that abuse in the streets or not?
I mean, not abuse in the streets, but obviously there's always some like reticence for people to try British food. There's that thing that hangs over it, right? And to be fair, I think it's well earned in some circumstances,
100%.
right? Like, we never really sort of fully recovered from industrialization and from rationing, and not in the way that some other countries did in Europe. And so I don't begrudge people really for all of that sort of feeling. But what I found was with the press, quite often the press would be, in fact, I turned down one article which was put to me that they were going to write, and it was titled, "When did British food become edible?"
That's outrageous.
I was like,
It's quite a punchy proposition.
Yeah. And I was like, are you sure this isn't just translated incorrectly? And they were like, no, that's it.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I absolutely don't want to
let's not do that.
I'm sorry.
No. There's a point where I'm like, I'll be defensive.
Yeah. Come on.
Is Public House a British Brasserie? Is that how
Yeah.
you're titling it? Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, it's actually...
There's an element of provocation there to say, like, here I am.
Yeah, and it is sort of, a huge building in the heart of Paris.
Yeah.
Which we're sort of stamping our flag in the ground and saying, here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you are in the Opera District, which is... Have you been in the Opera House? It is quite incredible.
I mean, to be honest with you, that's one of my favourite buildings in Paris, way prior to opening the restaurant. I think if anyone hasn't been, you should go. We're talking about the Palais Garnier, and it's it's one of the most exceptional examples of its type of architecture in the world.
Oh my God.
Right? And it's so maxi, and it's over the top, and very very glittery, but I love it. I took my mum there for the first time the year before we opened the restaurant.
Yeah.
She was just mesmerised by it. So I'm really happy we're open in that area.
It does make you think, like, what have we done in the 150 years since that was built, where we can't now build a nice building? That was just unbelievable.
Right, that's back when people built buildings to last.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
And in fact, the last restaurant I was running, Holborn Dining Room, was in one of those buildings.
Yeah.
Right, it was in the Pearl Assurance building.
Gorgeous, yeah.
And that building was built for an insurance company for the headquarters. And, there was a staircase in it with a marble staircase, which was £100 million.
Fuck.
That's what it was insured at. So, and then you look at buildings nowadays and they're built for 5 years, 10 years. Because people are like, we're going to upsize. And then you go bankrupt and then whatever.
You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
You headed out in April to obviously launch the Public House, which is a British-inspired brasserie. Talk us through, for the listeners who don't know, what the offering is out there. Because you are a British guy who's been so successful over here, going over to France and going come on.
So there was, two reasons for going out there. One was that I do pies.
Yeah.
Right, it's kind of what I'm known for.
Well, you're the pie king. Yeah.
And I felt it was going to show the French a different side to British food that they didn't know, aside from just fish and chips.
Yeah.
Right? So that was exciting for me because I've got deep connections with the French sort of, savoury pastry charcuterie fraternity anyway. We've always been close. So I knew that there's this sort of ingrained part of their childhood and food culture, which is savoury pastry, just not hot, right?
Yeah.
So we just take it to that part where you make it hot. And I was like, they might find this delicious. And then the other thing was I can't remember.
Okay.
I've forgotten.
That was good.
Yeah, that was a good
enough,
first
though.
one.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. You've got your own pie kitchen out there, which you
Yes.
did have, obviously, in your old restaurant before you left. Talk us through the magic which takes place in there.
Yes, we have 3 chefs working there pretty much all day, and they're producing pies for. I mean, now it's kind of like 200 guests for lunch generally, and then around 300 for dinner. So 270 to 300.
Consistent throughout the week.
Consistent now.
Wow.
And it's.
Fuck you, Jay Rayner. Sorry.
Just had a flashback.
Sorry.
Don't say that.
I had a flashback, sir.
And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of production. And so we have this separate kitchen that we built, and we've got some very talented pastry chefs working there doing lots and lots and lots of pies. But, you know, we're talking about food culture in Paris where people eat out 2 or 3 times a week, whereas in the UK, maybe it's 2 or 3 times a month.
Yeah.
So the level of business is there. You just have to get people through the door, get them used to the food, and then you're winning, really, I think.
Why is that? Like, why are they so
Well, there's
easy?
always a trepidation about British food.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So there was that, something completely different.
Yeah.
For decades, Parisians have eaten Parisian food, right? So that's why you go there. It's such an amazing food city because there's so many good French brasseries, so many good bistros.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's weird. We don't actually have that many good British restaurants,
No.
right? We have incredible world culture,
Yeah.
but British restaurants, not so much. But I think what happened was in Paris was that, like here, like all over the world, young people cannot, this is going to sound a bit like UFO conspiracy theory, but maybe convoluted is a better word. It is, young people can't afford to buy anymore. They can't buy houses.
No,
So they have all of this money to spend instead, which they're doing. And they do it here in the UK. People spend it on going out and having a good time, going on holidays, traveling, and all these things. And I think what happened in Paris was all the young people of Paris went out and traveled the world, had an amazing time, but also developed this taste for all of these foreign foods. And we're like, we don't get this in Paris, really. It was the you know, cultural food scene was very small in Paris.
Well, it was Moroccan or French, right?
Yeah.
Basically.
I mean, it was just nothing like London. I felt like that, or New York, or, you know, somewhere different. And that hunger has now converted into restaurants opening up all over the city, which are offering something different because there's this need for it. And so that's another reason why we went over there.
Yeah.
Felt it was the right time.
You're like the pies. There's a similarity with sort of pâté en croûte and that
Yeah.
kind of like. So has that been an easier win in some ways?
Yeah, 100%.
And then have there been dishes that you've got on the menu aside from the pies that just haven't worked? People are thinking, this is too much for us.
Yeah.
You know.
So I mean, there's a family out in Paris called the Varro family. They're the famous charcutiers of the city and of France, really. And we were talking about it one day, and I said to them, I feel like pâté croûte, which is what brought us together.
Yeah.
Essentially, like, that is this like long bridge made of pastry between, you know, the UK coast and the French coast.
Yeah.
Just from there to there. And that's what connects us in terms of that part of our food culture. Dishes that don't work, right, and things that were too weirdly, like fish pie.
Really?
Really?
Honestly, I think I make
What, too soft or what?
I think I make such a banging fish pie.
Yeah.
And it's a textural thing, I think, because it's kind of soft on soft. There's like a little crunchy top. But
Yeah.
that was a step too far. And what's the other one recently?
What about the Scotch egg? Do they like that?
They love Scotch egg. Yeah. So that sells
Because
really
they would
well.
never seen something like that before, right?
Yeah.
With the
they
boudin
kind of
noir, you put boudin noir in there, do you?
do you know what? We started off with one of the best boudin noirs in France. Very, very soft boudin noir. Jay didn't like it. The French actually loved it.
Yeah.
But again, at the beginning, we were getting a lot of British guests.
Yeah.
And they weren't necessarily getting that either because it is a very soft black pudding. It's not like British black pudding.
Yeah.
Boudin noir is different. So actually, we've gone to a more traditional British pork Scotch egg, which is delicious. And it ticks all the boxes.
But what was the other thing they didn't like?
I did a bread and butter pudding recently.
Yeah.
I didn't like it.
Again, I was like, man, it was so good. I'm telling you, it was so good. And just just didn't work.
Really?
And I'd be like, I wanted to shake the guests and be like,
come on,
mate, it's so close to Pamperdou.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Stop being so funny about
you
this
should go out in the
thing.
dining room and just be shouting that at people. It's Pamperdou.
It's fucking
Eat
Pamperdou.
it.
Yeah.
No, but fair enough. Like sometimes just it's textual things and
for sure.
whatever. You just have to adapt. Right?
Yeah. Ben, what have you made for Calum? A little drink. Get him refreshed. Come on.
Well, actually, refresh is a good one. I've made an Arnold Palmer.
Which is what?
It's a classic massive iced tea.
Okay, perfect.
Iced tea and lemonade.
Sounds
I'm
amazing.
down with that.
Is that all right?
It's perfect.
Yeah?
So, I don't know everybody. Well, I speak about it very openly, but I don't drink.
Okay, well, there we go.
Yeah. so
No,
perfect.
we've done a research. Don't you worry about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
This is just a fucking
my Stanley.
standardised tea. Now, come on. Robin Gill didn't mind calling out Jay Rayner when he came on the show. He felt that he'd got a somewhat clickbaity review from the big man. He's now moved on, obviously, from wherever he was to the Financial Times. But when he visited you guys,
Wherever
said
he
it was
was,
a
that's a
calamitous
very nice
experience.
Yeah.
He even gave you pies for kicking. You're the fucking king of pies. Jamie Oliver, who we're great friends with, says you are the greatest pie maker he's ever met. Elliot Grover, another great friend of the show, says like your pies are just like better than anything he's ever had in his life, and he's had many great things. So what did you think when you read that review? And a couple of months on, probably 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Has that changed? Because initially you're angry, I'm guessing. And also, it's easy for him to go out to Paris and do a clickbait review, is my view.
No, firstly, I don't think he went out there to do a clickbaity review.
Okay.
I honestly think that Jay went out there to try and support, a British chef doing his thing out in France. So this is going to be maybe different than people think. I react to the situation, but I had a long time to think about it.
Yeah.
At the time, honestly, it was devastating. It's one of the hardest things I've gone through professionally and personally in my life. Never had a bad review before, and I think it was a huge knock for me. And at the time, I was very lucky. I was supported by some very, good friends and my wonderful family, dealing with that mentally. But it was tough. And part of it's tough is because he's just put so much work into these projects. I remember seeing someone online commenting on Jay's Instagram saying, I can't believe he wasn't there that night 2 months after opening.
As in
And I was
referring to
like,
yourself.
To me. And I was like, do you know what? Like, do you know how much time I was there before the opening?
Yeah.
Like how much work goes into leading up to that. And actually the night of the review was my wife's 40th birthday, right? So I'm sorry, I wasn't going to be there that night. But so I don't know, like I think I was more, what really hurt me was I was more upset by other people's reactions and people wanting to give me a kicking and being like, haha, look at what happened to this guy. I got 2 messages that day, one from a friend of mine who's very successful in Japan, Daniel Calvert. And he sent me a message, a really lovely message that evening saying, don't pay any attention to it, keep your head up, whatever. And Josh Nyland sent one from Sydney.
Great man.
Similar message. And my reaction was, how the fuck have they seen it?
Yeah, right, yeah. It's got that far.
It hurt. It really hurt.
Yeah.
And I know they were sending it from a place of love, but I was like, how have they seen it? It's not even been 24 hours.
Yeah.
It's quite British though, isn't it?
Global.
That, like, is it called tall poppy syndrome? Someone like yourself who's like really made this extraordinary name for yourself. There's an element of pleasure in people sort of cutting.
Well, it's like the chef we were just with who'll go, nameless, said, people come to my restaurant now because it's got good reviews, hoping to have a shit time because they want to be, like, people kind of get that kick out of being dicks.
Yeah.
Sort of British thing.
But like going back to the review itself, I don't argue with any of Jay's points. I think they were all relevant. And what it did was highlight a lot of things that really needed to change quickly. So actually, what was a very difficult thing to deal with mentally was really positive for the business. And we made drastic changes very quickly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing it really taught me was something which I carry a lot now, which is about like gut instinct, right? So this is the thing I tell people every day now, which is not every day because they pretty much shut up, but your gut instinct, when people talk about that, what that is it's just your experience talking to you, right? All of the experience that you've gathered through your career. When you say, I've got this gut feeling, it's not anything mystical. That's just your experience telling you, no. Trust yourself on this one. Make this right decision. And I had a few things at the time which were screaming at me, and people were telling me, no, this is fine. And I should have just said, no, I know what I'm talking about here. I've worked in this business for 25 years at a very high level, and I know what I'm doing. And now I trust myself a lot more to make those decisions and just tell people, no, I'm right. Sorry.
Yeah.
But is that the cultural divide between France and England? Because I was going to ask you, what are the challenges of setting a place up there? I mean, Ben and I are huge fans of the book Waiter in Paris by Chisholm, which kind of, talks about many things. But one of the things is the fact that in France, it's still very much a vocation, working in hospitality, working as a waiter. What are the challenges of opening a place there? And then what are the sort of differences which are easier over in London?
So challenges... I mean, there's a lot of challenges in Paris, but in the same way there is in London. Maybe the bureaucracy of opening a restaurant is nuts. The sort of gathering of stamps from official people and whatever. I mean, we have it here, but it's just nothing like in France, right? And it's made to run around in circles and very difficult to get an opening date for stuff. And, when you're opening a restaurant like we were in Paris, it's a huge building, the massive staff. You've got to sign contracts at some point, and if you don't have an opening date to tell people, that's really complicated. So that was difficult. Staffing has actually been great.
Yeah.
Right. I'm so lucky with the head chef that I've got in Paris, Mamadou, who's I'm bringing over to London soon on a whirlwind tour if anyone wants to meet him.
I do.
Absolute legend. Yeah. Just Monsieur Operation. And me and him do the menus together. We develop all the food together. But just in terms of running a big, huge, busy restaurant, he is immaculate at what he does. So I've been very lucky with staffing and things like that. Ingredients, I'll tell you one funny thing. Okay, so the French are so protective of ingredients that developing new menus is actually quite complicated because you want to test stuff out.
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, okay, so for the winter menu, let's test this dish. And they're like, yeah, it's not in season. You're like, yeah, I know. We can. It's just on the cusp of it, though. We can get it, right? And they're like, no.
Really?
Supplier won't give it to you. And you're like, oh, for fuck's sake. But so stuff like that can be complex.
So you've got to be in the season to even be... I mean, like you say, you don't want it on a menu till it's banging season, but you'll be testing it here.
Yeah, but you can't even go to the supermarket because pretty much the supermarkets are
like...
they're strict with season. So I love that. I respect that.
Yeah, amazing. Nightmare for menu development.
Does make menu development complex. But yeah, and I mean the quality of the ingredients out there is another level. I remember one of the first weeks of development we were doing for the restaurant, and I said, I want to do a really beautiful roast chicken on the menu, and I said, can you just get as many chickens as you can for me tomorrow or the day after, right? Organic, top quality chickens. Thinking maybe 6 or 7 are going to come. And it was like it was like 3 days later, whatever, we did this tasting. There was like 30 birds. And there was this wall chart with when they're available in the year because the farmers won't sell them all year round. And depending on the weather and all these different things. And I was just like, okay, yeah, it's another level.
So that's really just baked. Because we speak to a lot of chefs here who are very proud of sourcing British seasonal ingredients. And that is, you in some ways have to fight to do that versus the kind of classical wholesale thing. Whereas there, it sounds like that's flipped on its head. Yeah. That is just the system.
The only thing I'll say is that the suppliers themselves can be tricky.
Right.
So they are very protective of who they supply. So a British guy coming and wanting to open a restaurant.
Right.
Sometimes it was just doors were shut quite early on. And I'd have to lean on my contacts in Paris, my friends in restaurants.
Sort of work around.
Yeah, they'd have to go and talk to the supplier and say, no, it's all right, we know this guy, he's a good guy, or whatever. Otherwise, they just wouldn't deal with me.
Do you bring anything over from Britain or not?
I was doing it at the beginning.
Because like the great French restaurants here, they kind of pride themselves on bringing on produce from France.
Yeah.
But I suppose we've just been at Camille and they're using British ingredients for a French restaurant. So
yeah, I mean, look, there were certain things that you couldn't get in France. So whether that's things like treacle or I don't know, what was one? There was lots of funny things like that with baking.
Yeah.
That just weren't available. So I was smuggling I was bringing them.
Fucking trickle, trickle in your body.
In the hand luggage.
Yeah.
It's legit.
The Eurostar has been great to me.
Yeah, it is very good.
Yeah.
Lots of luggage. on the
Yeah,
Eurostar. But now we've tried to sort of source only in France.
Yeah.
So I think with the tiny exceptions, but there were things like we have a fish and chips on the menu. It's big brasserie, so we put it on, and I was like, if we're going to do it, we're going to do the best one in the city. And part of that obviously is like getting an amazing batter, and I've got a great batter recipe, but it's with self-raising gluten-free flour.
Yeah.
Try and find self-raising gluten-free flour in France.
Not easy.
Impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, gluten-free flour at a push, right?
Oh.
But so we have to make our own. So we make our own at the restaurant and things like that.
Cool.
We've worked our way around things.
So your fish and chips are gluten free?
Yeah.
They're celiac friendly?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll bring my brother over. Have we enjoyed living in the city? I mean, we've heard a lot of differing stories about the quality of French food in Paris now. If you had to pick out 3 or 4 places to go for a long weekend, where are we going?
Oh, in the city to pop for lunch.
Yeah. If Ben and I are coming out for a nice weekend.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So if you're going for lunch, I would go to. Did they have to be French?
No.
Whatever you
anywhere in
just-
Paris.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Racine's
Yeah.
for lunch. It's this little Italian. It's just like ideal, beautiful Italian bistro. I love it. I go there as much as I can. I would say Le Cheval d'Or for dinner, but it's just at the top of every list in Paris at the moment, so I don't need to recommend that.
Yeah.
Hans is one of the best cooks in the city. I think he's amazing. Love
Is that a French bistro? Or?
So it's French Cantonese.
Oh, wow.
So it's this sort of fusion
Awesome.
by a chef out there, Hans Greco, who's Australian originally. He's been living in Paris for years, and I've always eaten where he's cooked throughout the city. And now he's I don't know. Hans, am I a friend? I don't know. Are we friends?
I know
I
you're
don't
friends.
know. Maybe we're friends.
Come on.
Yeah.
Seal the
And,
deal.
we go
Hans.
for lunch and stuff together.
Yeah.
But so I would say, I'm not going to recommend that, although it's great. I reckon Clamato is probably my favourite. It's the restaurant I've gone to the most since I started going to France decades ago. I go every single time I go. I think it's great. It's just like beautiful, fresh, it's seafood based cookery. Cool restaurant, great bread.
What's the best dish?
It changes all the time.
Yeah.
The menu. They do lots of raw shellfish, which is unusual, and you don't get that here as much. So it'll be raw clams, things like that, which we don't really eat so much, but they're delicious. And then after that, I would go. If you go and drink heavily after that, go to Au Pied de Cochon. Maybe it's closed between 3 and 4. I think at 4 in the morning.
Really?
Yeah. So it's going to become 24 hours,
Wow.
right? But it is currently only closes for 1 hour per day.
Well, just to refresh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
do 1,000 covers a night.
Wow.
Pierre de Cochon. And it is just, you walk in, the handles on the door are brass pigs trotters. I just love it. I love everything about that restaurant. I was there for the Beaujolais Nouveau party the other day. We go every year to that. I love it. I think it's just such an institution. And if you want to be part of French culture, that's a good way of going in.
Yeah.
You're obviously overseeing the newly opened Georgian restaurant, or I should say reopened at Harrods. Obviously, your pies are playing a huge role.
Yes.
But the thing I was fascinated by was the kind of revival of these ancient, I say ancient, old dishes from the Harrods archive.
Yeah.
Can you take us through a couple of the weird offerings? I say weird because they're weird and wonderful.
No. Look, I think that I'm sort of always drawn to projects which have buildings with history.
Yeah.
Like Public House, slightly different. That was a nightclub, right, which everyone knows in Paris. So that was kind of a cool thing about that building.
Yeah.
But again, Holborn Dining Room, this beautiful old building. And the Georgian, it's been open since 1911, right? And again, when that opened, that was the busiest restaurant in Europe, I think it was. 1,500 covers of service.
Jeez.
It's still 1,200, I might be exaggerating. I think it's 1,200 of service.
Either way.
It was all trolley service, right? So we've brought that back into the restaurant. So we've got all these beautiful trolleys made, and we have beef Wellington on a trolley. We have trifle on a trolley. We've got a lamb pie to share, which is on a trolley. But But yeah, the historical stuff was like the coolest part, right? So we had access to the archives going back to 1911 of all of these dishes. And yeah, the Georgian pie, so we call that the Georgian pie experience. It's just a beautiful lamb and rosemary pie, but it's served with all of these different, God, it sounds so pretentious when I say this, but I don't know another word for it, accoutrement.
Yeah.
It comes with all these different parts, which are all linked to historical lamb dishes going back to 1911 that were served at the Georgian, which we think enhances the pie.
Like what? Right?
So there's a beautiful ratatouille, which is cooked a la minute. There is tempura anchovies dusted in seaweed.
Cool.
There is lamb sweetbreads with romesco. And these have all been things that have been there from, you look back from the 70s and the 60s.
Really?
Because
those two things you just said there sound quite sort of contemporary, really.
Tempura anchovies is more recent.
Yeah.
Right?
But even the romesco and the...
But it might be a case of like, no, I mean, romesco's been around for a long time.
Yeah, cool.
But it, maybe the tempura anchovies, I mean, we adapted that slightly, but it was from a lamb leg and anchovy dish, which was served on a trolley.
Amazing.
So it's just sort of those things. Yeah, I love it. It's a great project.
Yeah.
You're known as the King of Pies, but I mean, when did you become obsessed with this sort of 600-year-old tradition? Because most foods have died out in this country over that period, but the pie has still remained relevant.
Yeah.
So what was the start of your love story?
So where it all kicked off was we were about, I think it was probably year 4 into Holborn Dining Room. And I'd always had a pie on the menu. It's always been successful there because I think it was the right, our audience at Holborn Dining Room. There's a lot of old law firms around us and media as well. Pies sat well on menus. And in that historical building, there was this basement that we called Aladdin's Cave. That was sort of how we referred to it. And it was, you go down there and sort of like ferret around looking for stuff. And we'd find things like silver service trolleys. That's how big this thing was, right? And we'd get them refurbished and put it into service. And I found a pie tin, which I know now is a corset pie tin, which is a pie tin which is made of 3 pieces, and it looks like a sort of lady's corset, and it's held together with these interlocking keys. And I knew what it was, but I had no idea how to use it, right? So all the, the technique for lining it. And I was like, meh, I don't like not knowing things. So I went upstairs, and my sous chef at the time was this guy, David Burke, who, one of the most experienced guys in London, right? He'd opened, some of the biggest restaurants, the Wolseley, the Orrery, all these huge places. And I was very lucky to have him as a number 2. But I was like, Dave, have you ever used it? And he's like, I haven't got a clue. I haven't got a Scooby how to do it. So I was like, all right. So I asked the rest of my senior team. No one knew. So we'll just open it up to the floor, right? Yeah. So 34 chefs at the time, and no one knew. And I was like, so this is quite a traditional British pie making technique, which we are potentially going to lose, right? Because if in our little microcosm, no one knows it.
Yeah.
So how many people are practicing this stuff, and how far do we go before it all just disappears? So for me personally, I was like, firstly, I want to learn how to do it. So I started studying the techniques. And then I was like, oh, we should try and teach it to our young chefs and get them learning these things. Because, they can do these amazing, sort of unbreakable emulsions with stabilizers and stuff. But actually, like kind of old school cooking, are they doing that? Maybe not. So I said, let's try and capture this part of British food history. And we started doing it. And the more and more we did it in the kitchen, the more and more demanding it was on the team. And we were doing it all in the main kitchen, and the senior chefs were just giving way too much time to it and not really doing their jobs. And that's my fault, right? So I was like, we had to sit down one day, and I said, look, we can keep it at this level. I think this is as far as we can go. Or we build another kitchen and we separate this work off. And I spoke to the owners of Rosewood, and they were amazing about it. They understood completely. I sort of presented it to them in a way where it was celebrating part of London food history as well as British, and they said, go for it. You got carte blanche. You designed the room. And that was how the pie room came about.
It was an amazing room. Did you expect it to capture everyone in the way that it did? 'Cause I mean, like from that moment forward, it just exploded. Right?
And the reason for the success of that room was because it was born out of necessity, right? So it was never like we sat down and went, what can we do to become viral, whatever. We just needed to like separate this work off from the main kitchen because it was so demanding. And I knew I needed a chef in charge of it, so I put Knox in charge. And, you know, day in, day out, that room was just busy with, you know, incredible development, and we were learning new things every day. And I remember very early on, I got a message from Thomas Keller saying, listen, is it possible that we can send some chefs to you for stages? Because we love what you're doing. We think we're showing another side of British food we never knew about.
Yeah.
And it was a real pinch me moment. I was like, well, what is going on here?
Yeah.
You know, because we just had our heads down, totally focused. And the next thing you knew, we were having all these incredible chefs come through the kitchen. Amazing. And I was like, oh, bloody hell, make sure it's clean and tidy.
Yeah. I mean, you built a beautiful room though as well. Like it was such a spectacle to,
So that was, I really believe that, you know, the environment that you're in affects your work.
Yeah.
So when I designed the room, we had an empty room and I kind of sat down on one side and I drew it, and then sat down on the other side and drew it, and gave these sort of mad drawings to an architect. But I wanted to fill the room with detail because I wanted that to reflect in the chef's work.
Yeah.
And still to this day, I'll be passionate about that wherever we're working. The kitchens must be professional. It must look nice, right, for the chefs. And the chefs need to be dressed nice. They want to feel good about what they do. Otherwise, they're sloppy.
Yeah.
Right?
But also, it was your wife who told you to start posting photos, right? Which also feeded the virality.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We were talking about that the other day, actually. She asked me if I had Instagram. This is obviously going back a bit now, but I said, yeah, I think I do. And we opened it up and there was one picture of my ex on there, and she was like, delete.
We'll get rid of
delete that.
Start by getting rid of that.
Yeah. And she was like, you should post this food because it's interesting and I think other people want to see it. And I genuinely didn't see the value in it at the time.
You thought sort of
that is
beige
mad.
pies.
Yeah. And everyone at the time was doing this like nut stuff, you know, like cooking octopus with red cabbage and all these like very colourful things that are beautiful. So why do people want to see that? And it was just, it was going up against the tide, I think, and it was the right timing.
So good. You started cooking professionally at Chapter 1 in Kent, famously a very tough kitchen. Just give us your memories of what it was like going into a place like that, because it was old school.
Yeah. Okay. So the caveat to this is that it was the first really professional kitchen I went to work in, right? So I went there very green and you know, probably quite rough around the edges. I remember someone who's a friend nowadays, he offered to glass me on my first day at the restaurant. And I thought he was
a sweet offer. Yeah.
And I thought he was serious. So I was like, well, I'll see you outside after work then. Yeah. And then he was like, what? And I was like, oh, so it's just like an open threat. There's that empty threat. Yeah. So it was an incredible place to learn how to cook. Andrew McLeish was at the time, he was voted one of the best chefs in the country and just won a star. But you learned how to cook very fast, and you didn't make mistakes. If you did make mistakes, you didn't make them again. Yeah.
Had you come up through like catering college, or what was your route into that?
I'd worked in like local restaurants.
Yeah.
Right. I think I actually went to Chapter 1 straight from a golf club, where we did a wedding once where the chef put smoked salmon trimmings in the jus, and I was like, what is going on at this place? Like, it's just nuts. This place is nuts.
He might have been ahead of his time.
Yeah, it might have been, right? Yeah. So, Roland, if you're still around cooking,
still putting trimmings.
Nailed your smoked salmon jus on the roast beef.
On the roast beef?
Yeah. But I think there was complaints, obviously, at that wedding. But so I went to that restaurant, and I remember my mum saying to me, I think it's a really good place. You should go there. And I think... I don't want to misquote Andrew, 'cause I do think he's an incredible chef, but I'm pretty sure he said to me in the interview, I'm not going to pay you any money and you're never going to see your family again. But if you want to learn, this is the place. And I was like, all right.
I'm in.
But that's what it's like that then, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you knew what you signed up for. Yeah. And lots of people left very quickly.
Yeah. Did you take to it? Like immediately? Was it?
I think my nature is I'm quite resilient and I like proving people wrong. So on the multiple occasions where different people told me they're I'd hear them say out loud when you were leaving at night time, they'd say, he's not coming back tomorrow. I'd be like, well, you'll see. And I'd come back the next morning, they'd be surprised. Because they just roasted you all day the day before. And so I think I enjoy hard physical labour. I think I'm somewhat of a masochist.
Yeah.
So that helps as well. And my dad was a real grafter. He was a massive grafter. And my brothers both are as well. So I think that rubbed off on all three of us.
Yeah.
In our different fields. Yeah.
Have we lost it? Have we sort of lost that masochism in the industry now? Like, people seem to not want to put themselves through it.
No, I think I come across young people all the time who, I mean, I'm dead against that style for many reasons. One is that we've lost lots of people from the industry over the years who we didn't need to lose, right? Because people were just like, well, I'm not putting up with this.
Yeah.
And we lost huge talents from the industry. So I'm dead against that. But in terms of people that are up for really putting it on the line, I still meet people all the time like that. And we have, we have chefs in the Georgian like that. We have chefs in Public House like that. And you have to tell them to calm down sometimes. Like, no. Like, I don't want you coming in your day off.
Take some time off.
Take some time off. Don't stay and do prep tonight. Tomorrow's another day.
Yeah.
But you do find these young people that are still hungry like that. So it really pisses me off when people sit there and say, oh, it's changed the industry. Like, young people aren't up for it anymore. No, do you know what? When we were young, there was loads of people that weren't up for it then as well.
Yeah.
Right? There's still people that are hungry for being successful. But just treat them more nicely, please.
Yeah.
We'll be right back after this commercial break.
Square is an all-in-one restaurant tech solution built for single and multi-location restaurants, bars and pubs. It's the point of sale that works with almost everything you need for day-to-day service. Payment processing, table management, and inventory management are just the beginning. The best restaurant POS software gives you the power to connect the front and back of house while freeing you up to focus on the customer experience, improving the flow of orders, and finding more ways to keep profit in your pocket. With Square for Restaurants, get menu management, online ordering, self-service ordering, and much, much more. Drop the pen and paper and simplify the way you run your business. For more information, visit www.square.com or click the link in the bio. It was then off to work at the Ivy, where you got your first taste of sort of cooking classic British dishes. What were some of your favourites on the menu there? And also, what are your thoughts on the sort of bastardization of the Ivy, once a great temple of gastronomy and sort of vibes, which is now a kind of Café Rouge? Yeah,
so again, this was another one. I went there because of my mum again. She was like, you should go to the Ivy. It's where all the celebs go. And I was like, oh, yeah?
Yeah.
She was like, yeah. It's always in the newspaper. So that was my first job in central London. My mum was a great manager when I was young.
Yeah.
And
she had your back.
Yeah. Good choices, mum.
Yeah.
And so I went there, and I remember like the first week there was like on the booking sheet it'd be like Al Pacino. And you're like, this is mad.
Yeah.
And one night we were sort of closing up, there was a few of us left in the kitchen, and Axl Rose came down the stairs and said, can you make French fries for me? And I was like, fuck yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Or did he sort of sit in the kitchen?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So there's like
cool.
very cool stuff like that.
Yeah, quite
back
buzzy.
then. Ivy was like really at its sort of peak, right? And I loved working. I remember Goldie rang up the kitchen once and asked for the recipe for Bang Bang Chicken, and I was just like, what is going on in this place? It's nuts. Alan Bird was the chef after Mark Hicks. He was lovely, and I sort of have a lot of respect for Alan and the team they built. Actually, Daniel Calvert, who's now #1 rated chef in Japan, in Asia actually, 3-star chef. Me and him worked together there.
Really?
Yeah. So Daniel came there, I think it was a 15-year-old, and they put him very quickly. Everyone sussed out he was going to be good, this kid, right?
Yeah.
Very driven, very focused. And they used to put him on the fish section next to me. He had this massive pasta boiler, which he had to get cleaned out and ready for lunch every day because he was cooking pasta in there as well as on the fish and whatever. And every day at like 11 o'clock, I used to get a little ramekin of Nescafe, and I used to loz it in his pasta boiler just before he came up to the boil. And he'd be like, realise that someone had done it again. Oh, who's stitched you out? He'd say, you see him rushing around. Daniel, I love you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, there was like the shepherd's pie there was one of the classic dishes. It was a really fun place to work. There's loads
What
of
was
people.
the secret to that shepherd's pie? I mean, was there a secret? Or was
Loads
it
of
just overhyped?
ketchup.
Really?
Loads of ketchup.
Really?
Yeah. Loads of ketchup and Worcester sauce in it. It was very much like...
It's sort of nursery food there in some ways, right? It's sort of like, it's comforting. It's
honestly, at the Ivy, it was a lot of that. And it was unashamed, right?
Yeah.
Alan would say to you, it's in that recipe because it makes it taste nice.
Yeah.
Like, would you want to not put it? Because it doesn't, and then it won't taste nice. Like, and that took from coming from fine dining, it took away a lot of the pretension for me.
Yeah.
And, but I remember just before I left, I remember Richard Caring coming down the stairs with his family, and they were introduced as the new owners. They came down to the kitchen, and I said, I'm leaving.
Oh, really? You got a sense that...
I was like, man, I don't know.
Yeah.
That was happening here because they were a family that weren't really from hospitality. They were from...
It's like the rag trade, right? It's like clothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just I don't know. And I again, you trust your gut feeling, right?
Yeah. 100%.
And it's, he's turned it into a very successful chain. It's now going to disappear probably for good after this.
Yeah.
It's falling off the market. So, but it's a shame.
Yeah.
Going back in Daniel, I mean, he cooked at the Bristol, didn't he? In Paris.
Yeah.
With
Eric
Ben.
Frechon.
Yeah. I mean, he's an incredible chef. It's a weird how he's one of Britain's great chefs and he's kind of unknown in the wider world. Like, I know John Williams has just been out there, but I mean...
He doesn't do a lot of press.
No.
Daniel's very focused on what he does. He's very interesting to talk to about food, about, the journey he's had. I remember when we were at the Ivy together, he went and did a trial with Tom Aikens, and he came back and he went, Cal, going to show you how to brunoise at Charlotte. Wait till you see this shit. Yeah. He was like so excited to show me this technique he'd learned of doing something different.
Yeah.
And there was just that excitement in him about doing food at the highest level from day one, very early on. So you'd always know he'd go on to do incredible things. And everywhere he's worked, he's excelled.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Under Thomas Keller, he excelled. Yeah. And he became very high up in those kitchens quickly. And then when he went to when he went to Epicure under Eric Frechon, he went there back as a commie, right? Like from sous chef to commie again.
Crazy.
And then very quickly became a sous chef over there and had to learn French.
Yeah. You see that a lot there. A lot of the people we interview, they do that. They've sort of risen. They've sort of.
No,
I took my time.
Yeah. But, and they're like, I guess there's an element of like, I'll start as a commie because they know they're going to rise up.
Was it Keller who was having sort of 40 stagiaires there?
Thomas Keller, gets a bad rap for his number of stagiaires. Yeah.
Thomas Keller, essentially, I think. I mean, I might get it slightly wrong, but I'm pretty sure he told Daniel where he had to go and work.
Really?
Yeah. When he said he wanted to move on. He kind of said, these are the places you can go.
To like fill in your gaps or to kind of like...
Yeah, it's like go and work with Eric in Paris. And that's what he did.
Just to go back to the Ivy, I mean, it was at the Ivy where you really started to enjoy London's devilish nature for good and for bad. I know you were friends with some other restaurants around the corner and you guys used to meet up in the early hours. But just talk us through like that time of your life. If you want to, I mean, you don't have to.
Yeah, like, I mean, I'm very open about this, and I think it's important.
100%.
For different reasons, right? So I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I have been. I mean, I've been sober now for 14 years, and
congrats.
Thank you. And I realised it was important to talk about when two reasons. One was someone tried to weaponise it against me once. They were like trying to. I hadn't really spoken about it openly, and they were like, "Oh, this guy's an alcoholic." And I'd been 6 years sober. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's pretty gross behaviour. So I was like, I'm not going to let that happen again.
Yeah, right.
But also, I think that people that are struggling in the industry need to hear it.
100%.
Right? They need to hear that there are people who have had a level of success, who are going through the same things that they've gone through. Yeah. So for me, I was always an alcoholic from the first time I ever had a drink when I was a teenager, and I went into an industry which kind of it's easier to mask it.
That's what it is. Around all day, right?
And the late night partying, when I'm coming in hungover in the morning, that's not completely alien to a lot of us. And fairly normal in a workplace.
And staff drinks is like a booze thing rather than, and
especially back then, right? That, oh God, when we were at the Ivy, we were out every night.
Really?
Every night. We would end up in...
And getting arrested and...
Yeah, and doing lots of silly things.
Yeah.
and I loved it, and I don't regret it for a minute.
Yeah.
Right, I had the best time of my life. I did some stupid things, and I really should be dead. Right,
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
With you. But that all got to a point where it sort of reached its conclusion when I was in the end of my 20s, and I had to go to rehab, and I had the support of some amazing people at work.
Did you call that for yourself, or did someone say to you, I
Do you know
think
what
you've got to deal with this?
My family were trying to get me to do it for years.
Yeah.
I was just in denial that I needed to do it, but that's what happens with alcoholism. You sort of deny that. You always tell yourself that you can sort it out.
I've got this. Yeah.
But that's the alcoholism lying to you, right? It's like telling you, no. It's like, you're all right.
Yeah.
You'll be fine. And you just don't realise that at the time. And what happened was there was a party. It was on a New Year's Eve. There was a party that night. And I think the month prior to that, I'd accepted that I was so physically addicted to alcohol, like so physically addicted, that that was it.
And by that you mean so that you couldn't go 30 minutes in the day, or like what?
Absolutely.
So like
I was drinking from the first thing in the morning.
So you'd get up,
and
en route to work you'd drink. Or...
Yeah, I drink vodka, and I was still running quite a busy, serious restaurant in London. But otherwise I'd go into serious like DTs and shakes and.
So you'd feel ill if you weren't drinking.
Yeah, that's the difference between physical addiction.
Yeah.
So physical addiction is where you just, you're a slave to it. All that you need to focus on is just making sure that there's some alcohol in your system at all time.
Right.
And and I think that I'd accepted at that point. I just kind of said, well, actually, Calum, I don't know if you can get out of this.
Were you scared? Like, it must have been a bit like kind of. I don't know. Is there a fear there, or is it not really?
Weirdly, I kind of just thought, let's just ride this out now.
Yeah.
Right. I don't see a way out of it.
Did you feel ill or not? Like, did you
totally? Awful. Yeah. Awful every day.
But once you'd had a drink, you felt better.
Yeah. It's this weird thing. That you sort of like level out once you've had a few drinks. But I just knew that I think at that point I was like, even like no one can help me now.
Yeah.
I'm just done, and we'll just go off into the sunset with this thing, see how it goes. And that New Year's Eve, there was a party in the evening. I was sort of like umming and ahhing over whether or not to go to it. And something just inside of me, a pure survival instinct, just said, no, that's it. If you go to this thing, you're going to die. And I remember it super clearly. And it was like, that is it. You will die 100% probably today.
Yeah.
And I rang my brother and said, I need to go to rehab. And he was like, fucking hell, been waiting for
at last,
ever for you to say that. And he drove me we drove to rehab.
That day?
I drank a bottle of wine outside and went in, and I had the highest reading that they'd ever had at the rehab of alcohol level, blood level.
Christ.
And I was there for a month, and that was it. I never drank again. And the reason I never drank again, because it's different for other people, was somebody explained something to me in rehab which just completely changed my mindset. I'm not like in any way, I'm not a religious person, I'm not a spiritual person, so that was never going to work for me, that side of things. But somebody just explained the biological science of it to me, of what I'd done to my brain.
Yeah. And
they were like, explaining it all with a sort of like chart and stuff like this, and about, the different chemicals your brain releases. And basically, like at the end of it, it's like, so basically, you've bollocksed your brain. Like that's it. You can't ever go back now. You've gone over that edge where it's just not possible. You've broken that part of your brain. And I was like,
right,
okay. Well, I now can kind of accept that.
Yeah, really.
And that was it. And
never again.
No, never again. Never.
So when you come out of there, what were you tempted not to come back into the industry? Was there a bit, the two things were connected, or
it's really weird, but sometimes people in sort of recovery talk about, you got to lock yourself away from these things, and you can't be around alcohol and whatever. I remember one of the first times I went out with people after rehab, and it was probably, maybe it was 6 months after. I was very careful. I sat in a pub, and one of the chefs that I was with he was dipping his fingers in his pint, and he was flicking it in my face, and he was going, "Come on, Cal, fall off the wagon. Go on, just for this weekend. And we'll pay for rehab just this weekend." Jeez, and I was like, man, in my head, I was like, if I can get through this, I can get through.
Yeah.
right? But one thing that was really important to me was like, I thought if I cut myself off from being able to go out, being able to see the people I love, that will drive me to drink more than the temptation when I'm out, right? So I have to be able to have some sort of normality in my life. And work definitely was a big part of that as well. I was like, I need to be able to work. So what I thought I'm not going to do is I'm not going to go into some insane Michelin-star restaurant straight off the bat.
No.
Right? I'm not going to have someone shouting in my face. And at the time, a friend of mine, Marcus Verburn, was running Roast, and he got in touch with me and said, hey, look, I'm doing a cookbook at the moment. Is there any chance you can come and help me just manage the kitchen whilst I'm doing the book, and I can spend more time in the office? And I was like, perfect.
Yeah.
Roast is perfect.
It's like Borough Market Roast.
Borough Market, big restaurant, busy. I love those types of restaurants, but like all about produce and like, you know, simple cooking. And I was like, I can do that. And I loved it there. It's where I really threw myself into British cooking more, was at Roast.
Do you get people reach out to you saying, you know, and are you sort of open to that still?
Yeah, I love it.
In touch,
I love it. And I will do, if anyone, and then anyone's listening to this and they want to reach out, they think, you know, I'm struggling, or maybe I could just get some words of advice, or, you know, or just someone to talk to. I try and, as much as possible, do that. So I will dedicate a lot of my time as much as I can to that, because you need to hear it.
No, you do.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great for us because recently we've had John Spiteri, Phil Howard, and
me and John worked together actually. early in my
and
recovery.
Jackson Boxer, and everyone who's actually got through it, got back to work and done really, really well. So it's been great for I think everyone involved. You then obviously went to Roast, but then you moved on, and it's basically when you became the king of the pies in Holborn. But like, you were there for 8 years. How did that change over those 8 years? Because when you joined and you started to head up the kitchens and everything.
Yeah, so it's kind of complex at the beginning because the restaurant was a consultancy for my ex-boss.
Right.
So he was brought in to open a restaurant within the hotel, and I'd worked with him for years, and I love him, Des. I still do love you. And I think at the time, he and the owners, not the owners of the hotel, but the management of the hotel, didn't necessarily get on very well.
Right.
And I was kind of stuck in the middle because I was employed by the hotel, also employed by Des. And it was slightly complex, and it was there was fractured meetings. It was difficult sometimes. And when Des moved on, he said to me, look, you'd be silly not to stay, right? Do your thing, carry on here. And then when he left, that was where I had a bit more freedom to just do my thing. And that's where I started pushing the pies.
Yeah.
Smart move. It's been an incredible career for you. I mean, when you in between Paris now and Knightsbridge, what's next? Because I heard whispers that you were going to bring back the pie mashup, like on a slightly more accessible level to maybe some of your other projects.
That's
or is that a conspiracy theory?
No. You've
been deep on the internet.
No, it's a much more long-term project that I probably spend at least probably an hour every day thinking about, right? And it's something that is important to me because it's my food culture.
Yeah.
I'm a Londoner. And it's how to protect it and how to future-proof it, right? So it can continue for people for generations, that they come to London and they get to experience something that is London born and bred, right? And I think, you know, talking with a lot of the families that own these businesses, one of the hardships they've had has always been this fear of changing product in any way, and also changing prices.
Yeah.
Right? Because they didn't want to alienate their day-to-day customers.
But their day-to-day customers can't sustain them.
No,
so it's a bit of a kind of like difficult,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're selling, you know, a large plate of food for £6, it's really difficult to maintain a business nowadays in central London. So, you know, I look at, say, for example, Manzi's in Peckham, right? I mean, there is a market of people there desperate to go in there and have a good time and spend lots of money because pie mash is cool to them, right? It is. But you've just got to adjust that offering slightly to welcome those people, whether it's just having more interesting beers on the menu or, you know, changing things very slightly. And you know, I'm a staunch believer in tradition, but tradition changes over time, right? And that's something you cannot ignore. So if you say it has to be like this because of this, it's like, well, it wasn't like that 50 years ago, though, right? So be open to change. But one thing with those buildings is they're all protected.
Yeah.
Right. So whatever happens to them in the next decade, if someone wants to open, a Mr. Whippy in there, whatever, it will still be a pie and mash shop in a decade's time.
Yeah.
So that takes some pressure off.
You can go back.
Yeah.
When you're ready.
When I've got the master plan all together and the investors.
Yeah.
Well, you're one of the best.
Investors. Because I'm skint. No,
Yeah, right.
no. But like,
No,
you need backing.
money,
You need backing. Yeah.
I mean, you're one of the best-selling authors after Jamie and Nigella. It must feel pretty good. Do you have any other books in the pipeline? Because Ben's in the publishing game. He knows it can be tough.
Yeah. So I'm working on
I'm
working on a new book at the moment, which obviously is pie related, which is a bit different. It's I didn't want to just do the Pyram 2. I thought it's a bit, it's just too predictable. But the new book is something that you'd want to cook from, 100%, which is the most important thing. But it's also about celebrating history much more than the Pyram did.
Yeah.
Pyram celebrated the Pyram. This is about food history in Britain.
Yeah, nice.
And I think it'll be really fun when it's finished. It's a lot of work. The cyber attack at the British Library did not help in any way with that. But things seem to be back on track.
Yeah, you're back.
Now.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Ben, have you made any delicious little samples for Calum to try?
I actually have. I haven't made a pie.
Oh.
I thought that would be I'd just look like a dickhead because I could never live up to.
You would do. What have you made?
Anyway, Swelldale sent me down some extraordinary meat.
Go on.
But what they sent me was this little thing they'd done. So 2 rump steaks and some Bordelaise butter.
Oh.
And so I decided to make a little steak sandwich with a Bordelaise hollandaise, like to dip the steak sandwich in.
That sounds amazing.
I will do steak at lunchtime any day.
Yeah?
Yeah,
All right?
Yeah.
When you get that ready, Ben, let me ask you, what's been the worst customer or nightmare day you've ever had in a restaurant? Like, is there one thing which stands in the memory you just go like, fuck me?
Actually, at Rose, I remember I had an American shouting in my face because they were telling me that the type of beef we were using was the wrong cut for a Sunday roast. And they were insisting that you use brisket braised beef on a Sunday roast.
Right.
And that as a British person, I should know that. And I was kind of like... Anyway, genuinely shouting, and it was in front of a massive group of people who were all horrified by their sort of their friends' behaviour. But I think at the time I was already leaving roast, and the urge to just not smash this person in the face. It was a tough place to be. But in the end, I just kind of sometimes these things you just got to be like, no, sir. You know what? You're totally right. Yeah, and then I just left. It.
Why did you leave Holborn in the end? Like 8 years there. Obviously, you've gone to do some wonderful things. Yeah. But was there like a fallout? Was there like...
No, a lot of people don't realise that Holborn Dining Room wasn't a standalone restaurant.
Yeah.
Right? It was in a hotel. Yeah. And I'd worked very hard at that restaurant in getting it to where it was, and I feel like after that 8 years, it was in a great place, but I didn't see how much better it was going to be.
Yeah.
Right, and I was itchy to do something else, and I think we had conversations, and this is with the owners of the group who are amazing, Dr. Sonia Cheng and her family. We had conversations about me doing other things and them investing in that, and that didn't happen, and these opportunities kept popping up. And I was working very hard at the time, doing a lot of hours, and there was a lot of things going on in my family life that were difficult. And putting crisps on sandwiches. Yeah, I've got crisps. Oh, I'm down with that. And I needed some time for my family. Yeah. And I just thought, if I stay here, I'm never going to be able to do these other opportunities. So it was all agreed in the end. In the end, we made a clean cut, and I moved on. And the next thing was Public House.
What a next thing.
So Ben, come and talk us through the sandwich. Do we dip in there, or what do we do? Well,
yeah, sort of like French dippy. This is Bordelaise butter made into a hollandaise with a bit of tarragon in there. This is a steak sandwich, a rump steak from Swelldale, grass-fed, beautiful meat.
Amazing.
And I thought we could put some potato crisps in there.
Yeah.
Am I going first? Or you?
Yeah, you go first.
No,
of course, you're a guest.
I will say, Calum, I did make this before arriving.
Okay.
And so it's probably not as hot as it could be.
That's all good.
But
good.
I hope it's good. I'll have a little bite just so I can warn you off if it's not.
It's better than my usual lunch, if I'm honest with you.
Which is what?
So since sort of moving on from Holborn and whatever, one of the things I really wanted to focus on was my personal health, right? I'm terrible. I've like for 20 odd years, I didn't do any exercise at all. Not a like a step into a gym. I think I told my wife once that I was going to a gym, but I wasn't. And I threw myself into exercise. I was like, I'm 40 years old. I need to really start pushing myself and getting fit again. And I've been very good at that.
Yeah.
And treating my body kind of as like a little bit of a project. So for lunch at the moment, because I'm on a cut, I do 15 raw egg whites.
Whoa.
With a dash of milk and 2 scoops of protein powder. And that's my lunch every day.
Fuck off.
And that's all I eat.
Cooked, is that it?
Yeah, raw egg white.
Raw?
Yeah, raw. And I just neck it. And then that gets me through to about 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. And then I eat like a normal meal. I'll eat loads of veg, piece of fish.
What about your wife?
So she'll eat normally.
Right.
Yeah, she eats normally.
So she doesn't have to get involved in egg whites?
No, but she's very good. She goes to the gym almost every day as well.
What about if you're in the restaurant? I mean, do you have to...
So I take the stuff with me.
Really?
Yeah.
So everyone's like having like a beautiful bit of pie or like,
And I get
You're shaking up some egg whites.
cartons of raw pasteurized egg white and just I don't drink it like that. But a friend of mine got me into it where you sort of blend it with a little bit of like he does it with Nesquik, but I do it with a chocolate protein powder.
Yeah.
And you just pretend you're eating one of those really thick milkshakes.
Yeah, right. So you're in.
But why
Shake
is that?
Shack.
I mean, you're always quite a skinny guy.
Yeah, but I just
I'm all right, Freddie. I'm cutting as well. I'm just gonna have the steak sandwich.
skinny but really unhealthy. Like
Okay.
I was eating badly, and I just needed to sort of.
Do you have any more vices nowadays or not?
Not really.
No.
I mean, what
You smoke or not?
No, I don't smoke.
No.
Horrible
I
habit.
mean, that level of egg white consumption might be a vice in and of itself.
That probably
Yeah.
is. Yeah. No, I think I'm not a monk, but I live a pretty decent life nowadays. I think.
Yeah.
That's travelled very well, actually.
It's all right.
Yeah, it's good. It's travelled well.
I mean, it's very, very good beef. So
It is,
I mean,
it's
like, that's
very
half
Beef
the
is
battle, right?
remarkably tender,
Yeah.
Yeah.
isn't it?
Swelled up.
It's also, Calum,
Well
it's
done,
been
swelled out.
beautifully cooked.
Yes, absolutely.
Are you a fan of swelled up?
I am. I think they're great. It's a great product.
It's a good product, isn't it?
Something for Britain to be proud of.
Yeah. Finally.
Yeah.
Well, should we go into locations?
Let's go to locations.
What is your go-to weeknight restaurant? Nothing fancy, but you keep going back, somewhere when you're not eating egg whites.
There is a restaurant in Deptford called Jinjiang.
Good shout,
right.
Calum.
Yeah, do you know it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I used to live in
it's great.
Forest Hill. We used to go up there, yeah.
Yeah, and they do lots of stuff which is you wouldn't necessarily see in a lot of Chinese restaurants, which generally my wife gets upset when I order because there'll be things like tripe or boiled intestines. Even the water boiled beef they do is just like such a level of intensity that I hallucinate sometimes when I'm eating it, and then I'll be accused of like, well, why have you done it again?
Yeah.
But I think it's
Wrong with you, man.
beautiful food, beautiful.
Yeah, nice. And what about if you're sort of little blowout supper, something to celebrate? Where are you going?
I think Perilla is one of my favourite restaurants in London. It's quite far from me. It's quite difficult to get to Stokey from South East London.
Hard for anyone.
Yeah.
Whereabouts do you live? Greenwich, yeah.
Yeah, just on the side of Greenwich Park. But I just think that Ben's cooking there, it really reflects his journey of cooking, right? And like where he worked in sort of quite classical fine dining and then did the sort of Nordic thing. And I love it. I think it's delicious. And I always try and take people there whenever they're in town. And we have celebrations there. I think my 40th was there. Celebrating my cookbook was there.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan.
He's a very cool cook.
Yeah.
He's a lovely guy. What about your hidden gem?
Okay, so another local one, because I don't think anything's hidden anymore in central London.
No.
But where I live, there is a bakery, which I kind of shout them out every weekend, but it's called Cakes and Layers, and it's run by two of the best pastry chefs in London, Clement and Tua. husband and wife, and it's just immaculate viennoiserie.
Nice.
And it's just an unexpected place for it to be.
Yeah.
On this sort of like, side road in Maze Hill, when there's not a lot going on there, culinary wise. And it's been a massive hit in that area, and they're looking at they've got, I think it's secured a second site now. And I just want to champion them all the time, because they graft and they produce beautiful, beautiful food.
Yeah, nice. I think London's good at that.
Yeah.
It can sustain these little places. Obviously, you split your time between London and Paris, but what's your dream long weekend getaway? You can have sort of Thursday to Monday. Okay. You can properly lean into it.
Montreal.
Nice.
Yeah, Montreal.
Yeah?
100%. I went and cooked there just before the pandemic with Noxie. We went over together and just was blown away by the food scene. They're so passionate about food there. I think it's what Quebecois, I think it's what they think about 23 hours of the day. They're thinking about food.
Yeah.
I love it. And they're so protective of their own food. And just great. And it's that sort of weird, oh God, no, it's not weird. It's great.
Yeah.
It's this mix of like almost Americana meets French.
Yeah.
And it's delicious.
Yeah, nice. Any spots that you particularly would shout out for people planning a trip?
Yeah, I mean, anything, if you look at the Joe Beef family.
Yeah,
right, and base it around that. So any of the businesses that are based around that, if you go to any of those, they're going to be good. I don't know, it's hard to hit a dud out there.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, everywhere we got taken, we had great meals. All of these very old French businesses are great. You can get things like, when you go, I've never been skiing, but what's the skiing thing where they like dip?
Poutine.
No, where they dip like cheese and cheese.
Poutine.
Fondue.
Yeah,
they're very good at fondue out there.
Really?
Yeah, and they kind of taught me the secret with the baking powder and stuff like
Very
that. How
nice.
you like keep it light.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it will just sets in your stomach.
Yeah, it does a bit.
But yeah, no.
Nice. Okay, so
I think if people are thinking of like, because everyone's like, oh, you have to go to Spain. But
sounds best.
really want to do like a massive foodie thing, go to
Montreal.
Yeah.
I love that.
If you do a night out, what are you drinking now? Like, do you have a non-alcoholic drink, or do you just have like a fruit punch or something? Because I feel like over the last 5 years,
it's getting better.
Non-alcoholic drinks have become
better.
Yeah, it's getting better. I think my favourite one in London is the Steady Pete at Hawksmoor. I think it's great. They've done a really good job with non-alcoholics. But I went very fancy restaurant recently. We went to Pierre Gagne in Paris, and they were doing some by the bottle, some still teas, which are served at ambient temperature. And that was delicious. And I felt special. I felt like I'm actually sort of having a normal time, like people having wine and I'm having this thing.
Yeah.
And they sort of, let you read the bottle and all of this stuff.
Quite cool.
Yeah, those things are all getting elevated now.
I agree. I think if you make a soft drink sort of selection, it's so much more impressive than a wine list or like a wine pairing. Like the guys in Gabriel from Waterhouse Project does a 6-course non-alcoholic wine pairing or non-alcoholic drinks pairing. And it's like all fucking, homemade juices, and all that kind of, which is more exciting.
Yeah.
It's time for Daddy Steady Cook before we finish off. Ben, what have you bought for Calum this week? We're going to ask him to put together a dish from
I've got a bag
your
that's fallen apart. So Calum, I'm going to show you some things and you can make something out of it if you want to.
It's like Ready Steady Cook.
Yeah.
Some nice rice. Very good basmati rice. I guess they're better for the planet, better for tasting rice, and better way of doing business.
Nice.
This is from the Korean pantry, dumpling sauce, which you can use for dumplings.
They are very good.
2 hot Asians, I think this is actually a vegan sambal from Papa Yo. Okay. Anyway, it's a spicy Malaysian condiment. Do I want to? I'm really stitching you up. This is the best harissa I've ever tried.
Okay, good.
But as you can tell, it's sort of slightly messing around across continents here.
Well, that's okay.
And the final thing, just to bring in one more culture, Bom Bom Gochujang.
Right, so we've really got a
you really
you don't have to make one dish. You can make a couple of little things, but how might you use some of those ingredients?
I mean, you've not got me at my strongest here.
No, I've done you. I've done you like a kipper, Callum.
Yeah, I mean,
you can bring other things to the party.
Yeah, I mean, I love that.
You'd have to. I mean,
Yeah, because there's not much there.
One thing I'm slightly obsessed with is that Vietnamese style omelette.
Mm.
And I'm aware that none of these ingredients probably play into that.
They all jump
I
in
reckon
there.
you could use some of it on there.
Yeah, two hot Asians got Shanks going in there.
Yes, yeah. And so I'd
And
probably
a
Little
do
sambal there.
And who knows? Maybe no, God, no. I'm not saying that. I'd get cancelled. But I'd say something like maybe put some rice in there and make it crispy on the bottom.
Yeah.
I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
But and the harissa, I'm just going to steal and
Yeah, you have that for yourself.
I love it.
That honestly is a
So it's sort of like a
incredible
Vietnamese
harissa.
egg toasty with a rice exterior and then the nice kind of spicy bits in the middle.
Nailed it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the one.
Sounds
Wow.
absolutely
Yeah.
delicious. I mean, on their own, each of these is outstanding.
And we should say you can get them all on the Deli website.
Such
all you got to
great
do.
produce, isn't it?
It's
Yeah,
seriously
Deli's
good.
amazing.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
can put in the code go to Deli and get 25% off everything. Have you ever thought about making a product for Deli?
Oh, I'd love to one day.
Can we do a business deal live on air?
We can.
Congratulations. We've just signed you up to create something for Deli.
Okay.
That's as easy as it goes. And you'll be able to use the code on Callum's wonderful creations as well. Just use the code go to Deli. And don't forget, it's 2 L's, not 1 on go to
It's
Deli.
always been 2 L's.
Callum, you've been absolutely wonderful. We could sit here for many more hours. We wish you the best of luck in London and Paris and whatever comes next. But we are going to finish off by saying, what is your go-to 3-course meal?
Oh, okay. Scotch egg starter.
With Boudin Noir or not?
No.
No, forget that.
Classic.
Yeah, we're not trying to press the
pork
French anymore.
Scotch egg. Sauce charcutier. Gherkins chopped through it. A little bit of mustard seed in there. Warm. A little bit of acidity from some red wine vinegar.
Oh.
And then, God, I mean, I'm like a one-woman man. Maybe a hot pork pie as well. Hot pork pie was that kind of changed me in my thinking about British pies. I remember having it at a pub in the Cotswolds once. I was like, man, these should always have been hot. Like, pork pies need to be hot. It makes all the fat unctuous.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Okay. And then dessert. There's a chef who's working I think he's in Hong Kong now, called Kerry Doherty. And he used to work in London. And his apple tart tatin was a thing of ethereal beauty. And I would eat that every day of the week if I could. It would ruin my gym work.
It would ruin
Yeah.
Kerry Doherty.
your egg white diet.
Apple tart tatin.
Well, that's a wonderful 3-course meal. Callum, you've been absolutely fantastic. Guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If you're watching YouTube, please remember that we do a Thursday audio-only podcast, which you can subscribe to by clicking the link in the bio. Thank you to the wonderful Deli. Thank you to the wonderful Sweldale. Thank you to the wonderful Square. And thank you most of all to Callum, who's been an absolutely wonderful
Thank
guest
you.
and been a legend in the industry for the last 15, 20 years or so. We wish you the best of luck with your new ventures. We're going to finish up by saying, what song do you want us to play you out with?
Oh God.
We got to start.
Always
We got to
something.
start warning
It always
people about
something,
that
this
one.
one.
What have I been listening to a lot recently? Oh no, okay. Pick up Belly Breathe by Common.
Belly
nice.
Breathe by Common.
Yeah.
That's
That's
coming
a
up
good
now.
Shout, Callum.
Callum, those are your go-tos. Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, man.
Belly Breathe by Common was
Belly
really
Breathe.